If you love ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, and everything that goes bump in the night, then mark your calendars for the West Kentucky Paranormal Expo, happening September 26 in Mayfield, Kentucky at the Mayfield Graves County Fairgrounds. This incredible one-day event brings together some of the biggest names in the paranormal community, including Aaron G. Thompson from Netflix's 28 Days Haunted, Jimmy and Jeffrey from Outlaw Paranormal, The Wind of Rose, Josh Morris, Michael Huntington, Rachel Ravensville, and many, many more special guests and speakers. Your admission is just $15, and that gets you an all-day come-and-go wristband so you can explore at your own pace. Browse more than 35 vendors, enjoy delicious food trucks, attend speaker presentations and panels, meet investigators, hear incredible stories, and dive into the worlds of hauntings, cryptids, UFOs, and the unexplained. Whether you're a seasoned ghost hunter or just curious about the mysteries that surround us, there's something for everyone at the West Kentucky Paranormal Expo. Tickets are on sale now. For more information, visit West Kentucky Paranormal Expo on Facebook and get ready for one of the most exciting paranormal events of the year. We'll see you in Mayfield on September 26th. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I'm the American Haunted Historian, Allen Sircy. We're back for Tennessee Tales Tuesday, where I talk about some of the wildest and weirdest, just the craziest stories I found researching the volunteer state over the years. You guys know I got a ton of books. I have 40 books I've done, and 19 have been on Tennessee. So these Tennessee Tales Tuesdays are a lot of fun. They're pretty easy because I have so much material to choose from. So today I want to do a story from East Tennessee that I found. It's not really a ghost story. And if you're an animal lover, you might want to skip this one. Just sit this one out and check out the show tomorrow because it's about cruelty to animals and something wild that happened in East Tennessee many years ago. So, before Disney World, before professional sports stadiums, before movie theaters existed in every town across America, there was one form of entertainment that stood above almost everything else: the circus. For generations of Americans, the arrival of a traveling circus is one of the biggest events of the entire year. Small towns would practically shut down when the circus train rolled into town. Businesses closed early. Children, they skipped school. Farmers left their fields. Entire families dressed in their best clothes and crowded along streets hoping to catch a glimpse of exotic animals like tigers and elephants. They saw daring performers and wonders from all around the world. And honestly, it's hard for us to fully appreciate just how magical a circus appeared to people living in rural America during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Most people never traveled more than a few counties from where they were born. Many had never seen an elephant. Some had never seen a lion, tiger, zebra, camel, or even a monkey. There was no internet back then, no magazines. The circus brought the entire world directly to their doorstep. For one day, a quiet farming community could suddenly find itself filled with roaring, big cats, exotic animals from Africa and Asia, acrobats flying through the air, clowns performing impossible tricks, and gigantic tents rising from empty fields pretty much just overnight. The circus wasn't just entertainment. It was an event, a spectacle, a glimpse into a larger world most Americans would never experience otherwise. And during the early 20th century, one of the most successful traveling circuses in America belonged to a man named Charles Sparks. Sparks operated the Sparks world-famous shows. It was a sprawling traveling circus that toured extensively throughout the South and Eastern United States. Like many circus owners of the era, Sparks understood that animals sold lots of tickets. His circus featured sea lions, seals, zebras, horses, ponies, and countless other attractions designed to amaze audiences. But one animal stood above all the others. One animal appeared on posters, advertisements, and promotional materials all around the country. Her name was Mary, or, as the circus advertised her, Big Mary. And according to the promotional material distributed by the Spark Circus, Big Mary was quote unquote the largest living land animal on Earth. And that was quite a claim. Mary was an enormous Asian elephant weighing roughly 5 tons. Circus advertisements boasted that she stood 3 inches taller than the legendary Jumbo the elephant, arguably the most famous circus animal in history. And whether that claim was entirely accurate, no one really knows. But it worked. People paid money to see Big Mary. Children talked about Big Mary. Newspapers mentioned Big Mary. She was a star attraction, the crown jewel of the Spark Circus. And for years she performed exactly as expected. She hauled equipment, participated in parades, performed tricks, and posed for photographs, and helped generate enormous profits for Spark Circus. Well, then came September 1916, and everything changed. The circus arrived in Kingsport, Tennessee, on September 12th. Kingsport was a growing East Tennessee town, and as was customary, circus officials organized a parade through downtown streets to advertise the upcoming performance. These promotional parades were common during the era. Animals, performers, musicians, and circus workers, they marched through town hoping to build excitement and convince local residents to come buy some tickets. That afternoon, Big Mary joined the procession. Walking beside her was her newly hired handler, a guy named Walter Eldridge. They called him Red. Now, here's something important to understand. Red wasn't an experienced elephant trainer. He was far from it. Before joining the circus, he reportedly worked as a hotel bellhop, and occasionally he was just a drifter. His experience handling elephants appeared to be extremely limited, perhaps even non-existent. Yet somehow he found himself responsible for controlling one of the largest elephants in all of America. And looking back, that decision seems incredibly reckless. But circuses in the early 20th century often operated under very different standards than we would expect today. As the parade moved down Center Street, crowds lined the sidewalks. Children pointed excitedly. Adults smiled and waved. Bands played music. Everything seemed to be festive. It was normal. Then Mary spotted something lying near the road. A watermelon rind. The elephant lowered her trunk, and she stopped to investigate. And anyone familiar with elephants knows they're remarkably intelligent animals. They're curious by nature and often investigate objects that they encounter. Mary apparently wanted a snack. But the parade, it needed to keep moving. According to witnesses, Red Eldridge reacted by striking Mary behind the ear with a bullhook. To those unfamiliar, a bullhook is a tool consisting of a long handle with a sharp metal hook attached to the end. Elephant handlers frequently use them during the era to direct and control the animals. Today, many animal welfare experts consider bullhooks controversial due to their potential for abuse. And according to numerous accounts, Mary reacted instantly. The giant elephant swung her trunk towards Red. Before anyone could react, she wrapped her trunk around him and lifted him completely off the ground. The crowd gasped. Children screamed. And then things became unimaginably violent. Mary threw Red to the ground. And witnesses later described seeing him strike the dirt hard enough to knock the wind from his body. But she wasn't finished. The elephant immediately charged forward and brought one enormous foot down on top of his head. The result was catastrophic. Several newspaper accounts describe Red's skull being crushed instantly. One witness later claimed the sound could be heard above the crowd. Panic erupted. People ran in every direction. Mothers grabbed their children. Men shouted. The parade dissolved into chaos. And lying in the middle of Center Street was the body of Red Eldridge, dead within seconds. For many people watching that afternoon, it looked less like an accident and more like a deliberate execution. And that perception, it would ultimately seal Mary's fate. The death of Red Eldridge, it shocked Kingsport immediately. And today, when we hear about an incident involving a dangerous animal, they have investigations. Experts analyze behavior. Veterinarians examine the circumstances. Animal specialists try to determine what happened and why, what went wrong. In 1916, things worked differently, very differently. The public wanted someone or something to blame, and Mary was standing right there. Within hours, word spread throughout East Tennessee. Newspapers began reporting the story in dramatic terms. Headlines described Mary as a murderous beast. Rumors circulated wildly. Some accounts claimed she had killed before. Others insisted she had shown signs of aggression for years. Historians have found little evidence supporting any of those stories, but once panic takes hold, the facts, they become secondary. The image burned into people's minds. A gigantic elephant had killed a man in broad daylight in front of families and children. For many people, there was only one acceptable outcome. The animal had to die. As circus officials attempted to determine what to do next, another problem emerged. The Sparks world-famous shows still had performances scheduled all throughout the region, and business depended upon moving from town to town. But when word reached Johnson City, the local officials reacted immediately. The mayor, he put down his foot. He refused to allow the circus to enter town. And think about the financial pressure that created. The circus couldn't simply abandon one of its biggest attractions. Big Mary represented a major investment. She generated ticket sales. She hauled equipment. She was featured prominently on all the advertisements. Yet, local communities were suddenly refusing to welcome the show unless something was done. The pressure mounted quickly. Before long, an informal meeting was held involving circus officials, local authorities, and community leaders. Calling it a trial might be generous. There was no defense attorney, no witnesses testifying on Mary's behalf, no expert testimony regarding elephant behavior, no discussion about Red's lack of experience, no consideration of whether the bullhook strike triggered the attack. The outcome had essentially been decided before the meeting began. Mary was sentenced to death. And honestly, that's where this story shifts from tragedy into something even darker. Because deciding to kill a 5-ton elephant was one thing. Figuring out how to do it, that was another matter entirely. An elephant isn't a horse. It isn't a cow. It isn't even comparable to most large animals people were familiar with during the early 20th century. Mary weighed approximately 10,000 pounds. Her skin was incredibly thick. Her bones were massive. And there was no established procedure for executing an elephant. At first, officials considered electrocution. The idea seemed straightforward enough. Electricity had become increasingly associated with executions once the electric chair was introduced. And some people believed it represented a more modern and efficient method than hanging. So preparations began. Electrical equipment was assembled. Wires were connected, current was applied, and then nothing happened. Or at least nothing close to what people expected. According to eyewitnesses on the scene, during the execution with electricity, Mary, she just stood there. Officials watched. The crowd watched. Mary watched. The elephant appeared more confused than harmed. The electricity had failed to accomplish its intended purpose. And now the organizers had an even bigger problem. The elephant was still alive, but public pressure remained the same. It was intense. And another solution had to be found. And that's when someone proposed hanging. Even today, the idea sounds unbelievable. Hanging an elephant? The logistics alone seem absurd. But after discussing the alternatives, officials concluded that hanging It was pretty much the only realistic option they had. The circus and local authorities eventually selected Erwin, Tennessee, as the location for the execution. And there was a practical reason for choosing Erwin. The town had something few places in the region had: a 100-ton railroad derrick, essentially a massive industrial crane used for lifting heavy rail equipment. If anything could lift a 5-ton elephant off the ground, this machine could. And so arrangements were made. On September 13, 1916, just one day after Red's death, Big Mary arrived in Erwin. News spread quickly. Thousands wanted to witness what was about to happen. People traveled from surrounding communities, from all around the area. Families brought children. Workers left their jobs. Farmers came into town. By some estimates, roughly 1,500 people gathered at the Clinchfield Railroad Yard there in Erwin. Imagine that scene. An enormous crowd standing around the railroad tracks, men in hats, women holding children, people climbing onto railroad cars for a better view. Everyone waiting to watch the execution of an elephant. It sounds surreal, but it happened. As Mary was led toward the derrick, witnesses described her as surprisingly calm. She didn't charge. She didn't fight. She didn't resist violently. In fact, several accounts suggested she walked willingly toward the execution site. A heavy chain was secured around her neck, and the opposite end was attached to a giant railroad crane. Workers checked the connections. The crowds watched silently. Then the signal was given. The derrick began lifting, and slowly, Mary rose from the ground. For a brief moment, it appeared the execution might proceed as planned. Then disaster struck. The chain broke. Accounts differ slightly regarding whether it broke completely or slipped loose, but the result was the same. Mary crashed back to the ground. The impact was catastrophic. Witnesses reported hearing bones break. The elephant suffered severe injuries, including what many believe was a broken hip. And now the situation had become even more horrifying. Mary was injured, terrified, in pain, and still alive. The crowd watched as workers scrambled to figure out what to do next. Think about that scene from Mary's perspective. She'd already endured transport, confusion, crowds, noise, restraint, and an attempted execution. Then she fell, hard. The pain must have been unimaginable. Yet officials continued. A heavier chain was brought in. Workers repositioned the injured elephant. Preparations began again. And this time, the chain held. Slowly, the derrick lifted Mary from the ground once more. Witnesses watched as the giant elephant rose into the air. Then they waited and waited and waited. Mary remained suspended for approximately 30 minutes before officials finally declared that she was dead. The crowd began dispersing. The execution was over. But for many witnesses, the image, it stuck with them. Newspapers carried the story all throughout the country. Photographs circulated. The execution quickly became one of the most infamous incidents in circus history. And perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire story is that many people celebrated it at the same time. They viewed it as justice, retribution, punishment for the death of Red Eldridge. Today, however, many historians view the event very, very differently. Because when modern experts examine the circumstances surrounding the attack, they often reach a similar conclusion. Mary probably wasn't a murderous animal. She was an elephant responding to a painful stimulus. Elephants are among the most intelligent creatures on Earth. They form deep social bonds. They possess remarkable memories. They experience grief. They recognize people. And they can react aggressively when threatened or mistreated. Several elephant experts who have studied the case believe the bullhook strike behind Mary's ear likely triggered an instinctive reaction. Remember, Red had virtually no experience with elephants. He had been assigned responsibility for one of the largest animals in America, despite not knowing how to handle them. It's entirely possible that Mary reacted exactly as a frightened or agitated elephant might react under those circumstances. That doesn't make Red's death any less tragic. A man lost his life, a family, they lost a loved one. But it does complicate the narrative that developed afterwards. Because suddenly the story isn't about a vicious beast, it's about a misunderstanding between a poorly trained handler and an extraordinarily powerful animal. After the execution, another question emerged. What do you do with a 10,000-pound elephant? Transporting Mary's body would have been extremely difficult, expensive, and largely unnecessary. The decision was made to bury her there locally. Unfortunately, no one appears to have documented the burial location carefully. Some accounts suggest Mary was buried near the railroad tracks. Others place the grave elsewhere, somewhere in Erwin. Over the years, the exact location became one of Tennessee's most enduring yet strangest mysteries. People have searched, rumors have spread, and various sites were proposed, yet nobody can say with certainty where exactly Big Mary was laid to rest. And honestly, that's a mystery on another level that adds another layer to the legend. Because eventually the story transformed from history into folklore. Generations of Tennesseans grew up hearing about the elephant that was hanged. The details became larger, the emotions stronger. The story just got stranger. Today, more than a century later, Big Mary remains one of the most famous animals in Tennessee history. Books have been written about her. Documentaries have explored the case. Historians continue debating whether the execution was justice, vengeance, or simply a tragic misunderstanding. Eventually the circus moved on. The shows continued. The audiences returned. Eventually, the organization, Sparks' world-famous shows, it survived another decade before being absorbed into the growing empire of Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. Life moved forward, but the memory of Big Mary never disappeared. So, how do we treat animals? What responsibility do humans have when tragedies occur? Where's the line between justice and revenge? And perhaps most importantly, who was responsible for what happened in Kingsport on that September afternoon in 1916? Was it Mary? Was it Red Eldridge? Was it the circus? Or was it an era that viewed animals very differently than we do today? More than 100 years later, people are still debating those questions. What isn't debated is the image, a giant elephant hanging from a railroad derrick in Erwin, Tennessee. An image so shocking, so tragic, and so uniquely American that it became one of the most enduring legends in the history of the circus. And that's why more than a century later, after her death, people still remember Big Mary. Not as the largest land animal on earth, not as a star attraction of a traveling circus, but as the elephant whose execution became one of the strangest and saddest stories ever to come out of Tennessee. If you want to learn more about wild Tennessee stories like Big Mary, check out my book, Southern Ghost Stories 1 and 2. That's right, there's 2 of them. I'm actually working on a 3rd. But you can find them on Amazon. Just go to Amazon, type in Southern Ghost Stories, type in Allen Sircy, my name, and they'll pop up. If you have Kindle Unlimited, they're free to read. So they're on Kindle, they're on Audible, all that stuff. Have you been to Monster City Madhouse yet? MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Man, one of their newest shirts is a whole lot of fun, Gravestone, featuring a mashup of Tombstone and the Universal Monsters. This Monster City Madhouse exclusive shirt is made from comfortable 60/40 polyester cotton blend, which quotes like, "I'm your Huckleberry, and hell's coming with me. You'll be ready to unleash monster justice." So, make sure you use promo code SAVE10. That's right, MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Type in code SAVE10. Get 10% off your order. And if you haven't done so yet, please leave a review for the show wherever you're listening. Those are so important, and I appreciate it if you've already done so. Be sure to follow Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook and Instagram, and send me some questions on our socials for a future Q&A episode. It's coming soon, I promise. I know I've been teasing it, but it's coming. July 31st through October 2nd, I'll be in Knoxville, Tennessee for CreepyCon, big horror convention. I'll be in the Southern Ghost Stories booth, signing autographs. The celebrities like Kane Hodder, Bill Moseley, a bunch of horror icons will be there throughout the weekend signing autographs. But it's one of Tennessee's biggest horror conventions, and it's going to be a big time. July 31st through August 2nd. You guys come see me. Well, I guess I've rambled long enough, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another big episode. Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available.